is Never the Chess, and this is part 2 of my series on openings for beginners by a beginner. All I'm doing is learning the first couple of moves, seeing how I like it, whether it feels intuitive, if it's fun to play, if it feels safe, if it feels like it's got potential for sort of noobs to learn, and then I'm just sharing my thoughts. With the last video, there was a little bit too much of a focus on the engine analysis, that sort of thing. I want to be a little bit more subjective this time. So it's also known as Spanish, which is why I've got the Spanish background here. Now we'll get to the actual games. The first one, that was actually the second one. The first one here ended in a loss right here. As you can see, I just blundered and made him one. But it was a Berlin Rio gambit accepted, and I intuitively managed to play book moves all the way up until my opponent played Queen to F6, which it says is actually a mistake. But yeah, I intuitively played book moves all the way up to Queen to F6. Now, the Ruy Lopez, just the basics of it, is E4 for white, E5 from black, Knight to F3 from white. Then the opponent plays Knight to C6, and then white plays Bishop to B5. This is as far as I went with the theory. This is the very start of the Ruy Lopez, and I just wanted to go from here, just play some games and see how it goes. I didn't want to go too far into theory or anything like that. That would just defeat the purpose. So that's the Ruy Lopez. It just starts once white plays Bishop to B5 on their third move. This game did end up in a loss, but I was able to, as we can see, I did develop into a solid position until I blunder. But I do manage to just kind of continue to go on and lose this game due to a mate in one. But as we'll see in other games, I'm in winning positions quite often. Even though I've sort of thrown them away a couple of times, I'm in winning positions quite often with the Ruy Lopez. This is the second match. This one's also a loss. It was against the Morphy defense, the Morphy defense variation. So we play our moves E4, E5, Knight to F3, Knight to C6, and then we get Bishop to B5, the start of the Ruy Lopez. My opponent plays A6. I went for the exchange variation, and yeah, we do end up losing, but it is book moves all the way up until this, my move right here. It says this one was an excellent move, but I should have castled. I just didn't realize that I should have castled. Castling seems okay. And you can see even up until this point, I've developed a slight lead, a 0.84, even just sort of one move out of the book moves. And the game just sort of continues. There are blunders. There's a mistake right there. There will be blunders in this series. This whole series will have blunders, inaccuracies, that sort of stuff. But again, I'm building into good positions. My opponents do make mistakes. They make mistakes about this as frequently as I do. But that's kind of a part of this series. Like, is the opening fun? Is it intuitive? Does it work for beginners to use? And if you can actually get into the Ruy Lopez, I do feel like it does tick a few boxes. It is fun to play. It's a little more fun than the Caro-Kann. It feels a little less safe. One issue I had though is actually getting into the Ruy Lopez. I've only got 5 games here because it's difficult to get into the Ruy Lopez. Black has too many ways of just taking you out of the Ruy Lopez. So I'm not sure if I can actually recommend learning the Ruy Lopez for beginners, because you can't guarantee that you're actually going to be playing into the Ruy Lopez enough, at least not at this level. I can understand it maybe later on, once you get a little better, but you can't guarantee that you're actually going to get the Ruy Lopez, so I don't see how it's a good idea to recommend to people to spend their time learning this opening, developing this opening, that they're not going to get to use, all of the time. Unlike the Caro-Kann, which is only 2 moves, you can always get that. Every time the opponent plays 1e4, you can basically guarantee that you'll be able to defend with the Caro-Kann. But I can't say the same thing for the Ruy Lopez. Black has too many ways to just not be playing the Ruy Lopez. This game does go on to a loss eventually because of my own blunders, but I am actually in great positions. This is a common theme throughout basically all of my games, is I do build into solid positions, and using the Ruy Lopez, it's the same thing. I can build into good, strong, winning positions. It's just me that sort of blunders them away with, moves like that. Moves like that there. It's just not a good move. I was looking to attack the queen. It's just not a good move. It just isn't. It just isn't a good move. 3 blunders in this one. 1 blunder from my opponent. Then my opponent missed a win there, which I capitalized on again. Even after the blunder, we are able to get it into a good position. Yes, because the opponent made mistakes. But again, they're going to. I'm looking to see if the opening just feels natural and intuitive. And yeah, the opponents are making mistakes. We are able to get into good positions using the Ruy Lopez. Now we get into the third game. The third game was the Danish exchange variation, which was a win. And as we can see, my accuracy is just off the charts, 92.2 accuracy. This, I felt, was absolutely fantastic. I've got 35 best moves here. Again, the analysis isn't overly important, but just the idea that I've got 92.2% accuracy, that I've pulled off a game and played this well using this opening is just absolutely fantastic to me. So we get into it, and then it plays a little differently. Is this some sort of, I don't know what this is, but apparently it was a book move. Then I played it's book moves all the way up until where is this? Move 5 with E takes F5, which was a mistake from me. I shouldn't have taken. I should have developed the knight if I wanted to stay in the book. But I took the pawn, just looking to just keep playing, really. Then the game does keep sort of going on, and eventually I get into a good position. As we can see, that was the wrong move with the king, but we do develop ourselves into a good position. We are winning here, plus 1.67, and eventually, look at this, plus 3. We're getting into great positions coming out of the Ruy Lopez, but an issue I had was I'm not developing here enough. The queen side doesn't feel like it's very well developed, and in this particular game I wasn't able to castle either, because the opponent went for a queen trade. So I manually castled. But, you know, we do get into good positions. We lose it. We do lose it every now and then. But we're getting good positions coming out of the openings, and then eventually just capitalizing on the opponent's mistake, which is what we did here when they played whatever this move, bishop to f5, looking to attack my pawn. But we just come in and fork the rooks and start going from there. That's basically the end of that one. My opponent blundered, but it doesn't feel difficult to get into good positions using the Ruy Lopez. The next game was also a win. This one's using the Gundarum variation, apparently. And again, my accuracy is very high, very high. This is another very well-played game, despite there still being blunders, even a missed win. But basically, so this one, he pulls the queen out early, and this is apparently still a book move. Pulls the queen out to f6 after I played the bishop to b5. Start the Ruy Lopez. His response is queen to f6, which, you know, he hasn't developed. He hasn't developed his bishops. He hasn't got his knight out. I'm not too sure sort of how strong this really is, because if you learn how to just defend against the queen, it's not very scary. And in fact, I've already got my knight here. He's not actually threatening anything. He can't come here to hit here because my knight, he doesn't actually have a real threat there. I don't know why the queen's there. So this game just went on to, basically, I just stomped him with the knights. I saw here that I could jump in here, hit his knight, and also hit this square here, which was the main target. I knew he would move his queen. And then he did move his queen, so I hit this one, forked the king, and the rook. And then he moved his king, I took his rook, and then we went from there. Then this was actually a blunder. I didn't realize this was such a bad move at the time. But I made the best move, or he made a blunder afterwards, and then eventually we get to this position here, where I just started this like mating attack with just check after check after check. Not this position, right here I started it. So I went here because I knew it was defended by the knight. Then he moves his king. Then I moved up here because I knew that I just wasn't under attack there. Then he's defended with his queen. Then I checked him again instead of trading. I checked him with the knight again because I knew that he couldn't recapture it. He had to deal with the knight's check, and nothing could get rid of the knight. So once he moved down, that's when I realized I can actually just hit him with another knight check, and he still can't get rid of the queen. Then he moves up. Then I move the bishop in, still hit him with the check, and he can't take this because the queen is actually pinned here. Then he moves away. Then I realized I can actually just take his queen and end the game. I really liked that mating sequence that came out of the attack. So the Ruy Lopez to me looked like it can deal with that early queen attack pretty easily. My opponent made some bad moves. I played very well. But the next game was a loss, and this was the classical defense. So I went through, eventually here we go, bishop to b5, book moves. Then we got his next move was a book move as well. And then I've actually misclicked here, or this was just a mouse slip. I was supposed to castle, and I think castling would have still had me playing book moves. I did manage to get myself into a good position again, but it got blundered away, and then I sort of just lost in the end game. So here we go. Look, I'm in a good position here. I'm up plus 3.10, plus 4.11. Like, I can get into good positions using the Ruy Lopez. I don't have any problems with actually developing myself into good positions using it. Now, what I wanted to bring up here is just my general overall sort of thoughts on the Ruy Lopez, which are that it feels very powerful in the right hands. I don't, despite having a couple of really good games with it, and even having a brilliant move in this loss. I actually had a brilliancy in this one, which was apparently bishop to d6 was brilliant, but what else was I going to do in this position? I didn't want him to take my bishop. To be honest, I don't actually think there's any other moves to play. I don't understand why this is brilliant. It attacks the rook, it escapes the danger. Look, what other move would you play? There's no... I don't know why this is a brilliant move. There's no other move to play. That's the only reasonable move. Everything else, like the knight can't develop. Like, well, I don't want to put him there. I don't want to put him there. Just, that seems pointless to develop the rook. It's just, yeah, sorry about the little tangent on the brilliant moves. I'm not convinced they're actually brilliant moves. My overall thoughts are that I don't believe it's that powerful in my hands, despite the accuracy. I think other people could probably make more use out of it, even at my level. I do think it could probably come more naturally to other people as well, even other beginners. One issue that I have with it, and this is the main thing, this is actually the main reason that I can't recommend it to other beginners to really spend their time learning it or using it, is that it's harder to actually get into a Ruy Lopez game than you'd think, at least at my level. I played so many games and ended up having a hard time getting into Ruy Lopez games because my opponents would just play moves that take me out of the Ruy Lopez early on. I guess this is the downside to an opening that doesn't really start until the third move, which is that a bishop to b5. So you have to play e4, then the opponent has to play e5, and then there's knight to f3. You have to hope the opponent plays knight to c6. Then you play bishop to b5. There's so many ways that things can go wrong. It's not really like an opening that I feel like you can just stick with all of the time and just always play and always develop and always get better at, which is kind of what I'm after in this series. I am looking for openings that people can reliably play at least, and I don't feel like the Ruy Lopez is one that you can rely on to actually be playing. You can get a game as white, play e4, and then the other guy can just play d4, and now you're not playing the Ruy Lopez anymore. You're in a Scandinavian defense. I understand that this issue will be sort of common throughout a whole bunch of openings, but since this opening doesn't actually start until move 3 for white, it's harder to actually get games in the Ruy Lopez. So I can't in good faith recommend for other beginners like myself to spend their time learning this opening that you're barely going to get. Just for comparison, I ended up getting all 10 of my Caro-Kann games done before I got 5 Ruy Lopez games. I ended up playing like another 5 Caro-Kann games or so before I got my 5th Ruy Lopez game. I was waiting so long just to finally actually get the Ruy Lopez game. I played a whole bunch of other games before I could get here. You just don't get the position often enough, at least at my level, which is sort of what this is what this sort of series is about, people that are about my level. So I can't really recommend it to beginners because, like, why waste your time if it's going to take that long to actually get? As far as the fun factor goes, it is pretty fun. It's more fun than the Caro-Kann, which is what I did the last video on, but it does feel a little bit less safe. So yeah, I liked the opening. I think there's lots of potential there. I played very well in a couple of games. It did feel pretty intuitive as well. I managed to get through, up to like move 5 or so with the book moves often enough. But the position just doesn't come up enough, so I don't see how I could recommend it to beginners to spend their time learning when you might not actually be able to play it all that much. Yeah, that's the end of this video. If you'd like, you can catch me on twitch.tv/neverthechess. Till next time, I'll see you later.